Hey guys, welcome into the Week 10 show, the College Fantasy Football Site YouTube show. I am Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the College Fantasy Football Site, welcoming you guys in. It's a big week for many of you all. Some of you guys wrapping up the regular season. For some of you in really huge leagues, big leagues with 16-team playoffs, you may be starting the playoffs this week. A lot riding on the line. Playoff spots, seeds, and even advancement in the playoffs. I know for the CFF site, we have 3 in-house leagues this week going on this year. We're in the double elimination portion of our tournament. We've got 3 teams left in each bracket, and the winner of that league, of each league, will get the CFF site t-shirt. So good luck to you guys that are still alive in that league, and we'll announce the winners in a couple of weeks. Waiting for a lot of you guys to join in, but while we do that, let's run down what we're going to do this week, what's on tap, and what we have coming up here for the show. First of all, what I will do is we'll run through the player rankings like we always do. We're going to go through the start bench as we usually do. We're going to end it with some Q&A, but we're going to throw a couple of things into the mix this week. I'm going to try to condense the player rankings and to keep it a little short and sweet this week. One thing that I'm gonna let you guys do is I'm in a league that I play on Fantrax. It's called the Fantasy for St. Jude. And Zachary Toe, if you're out there listening, thanks for setting that up. What it is, guys, is it's a cumulative points total league. You set a lineup once. You set a lineup every week. I think it's 14 starters. You pick like 4 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 4 receivers, a flex, and a tight end. And you can only pick a guy one time during the entire season. So if I pick Lamar Jackson in week 1, I can't pick Lamar Jackson again for the rest of the year. The reason why I bring this league up and why I mention it, why I am mentioning it, is because 1, we're going into week 10 now, and 2, I've been leading the league. It started out with about 200 people, I think, that were registered. I think 125 or so actually actively participated at the beginning of the year. It looks like right now we're down to about 50 active participants, but it looks like it may be a 5-man race. I actually took the lead over in that league in week 4, and I am still sitting comfortably ahead by about 180 points cumulative. The reason why I bring that up is for the first time this year on this show, I am going to announce the lineup that I am going to play with that week in this league, as long as I don't make any changes. I'm 180 points up, and the reason why I think that's important is because right now, from the players that I start every week, I've got a 22.5 point average per player. So I think it's maybe just some additional insight. If I announce one of the guys that I have in my lineup, I feel good about them. Now, that average may come down a little bit because we're getting later into the season and some of the top guys are no longer available. But I am going to announce that lineup at the end of the show. And for you guys that are out there trying to catch me, maybe you'll change some things up as well and we won't have the same players. But like I said, I have about a 22.5 point average on the players that I have been starting in that league. I'm leading it. I've been leading the league since week 4. We're headed into week 10, and I think the league is only 12 or 13 weeks long, so we're winding that down as well. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple of emails with you guys, and this is sort of emails, crazy emails, strange emails that I've had over the years of just having the website. And I'll throw this out there as well. If you guys have any crazy stories, any crazy league stories, draft stories, whatever it is, send it on in. I'll read the best ones on air. We need a little entertainment on the show. We're going to do that. I'm going to share with you 2 stories at the end of the show on emails that I've gotten over the years that I feel are just very entertaining, and I'm going to go ahead and share that with you. And then also as well, gonna let you guys know what we're going to do here as well. Is I'm gonna put up some information on the website. A lot of requests coming in for the t-shirts. We're gonna see what we do. We have them going out to all of our league winners. Once we get everything settled down in a couple of weeks, guys, maybe I'll make an announcement on some of the t-shirts on where you guys could get that. But here we are, guys, week 10. Some of you all may ask, why are we doing it again on Wednesday when it's been up on the website all week on Thursday? That was my decision, guys, and here's the reason why we did that. We've been having the player rankings published on the site since yesterday. Or actually, I think since it was yesterday afternoon we put the rankings up on the site. I did not want to wait almost 2 full days to have the show, because if anything changes with player news, I want to be able to be ready to go. Updates on the site, updates on Twitter with player news. I don't like there to be a lot of downtime between the rankings and when I do the show. So that's the one reason why we're having it tonight. The other reason is there are 2 6 o'clock kickoffs Eastern time games tomorrow. I think it's Northern Illinois plays Toledo. That'll be a real interesting watch for a lot of you all in FBS formats. And then Ball State plays Eastern Michigan. I believe both of those games kick off at 6 o'clock Eastern, and I didn't want to conflict with any of you guys that may be interested in following your players on that. So with that being said, that's a rundown for the show. That's a rundown of the agenda of what we're going to do. And you know what I did do this, guys, is I did not, and I purposely did this, I did not prepare anything in advance with the player rankings. And the reason why I did that is because there are so many highlights that I made for players over the weeks. It was really dragging on along the show, and I want to kind of tidy it up a little bit, make it shorter with some of the player rankings. A lot of you guys tune in, and what you tell me is Joe, I wish you'd sort of piecemeal this. You did this at the beginning of the year. I kind of like when you broke it down: quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, start, bench. The one thing that I will mention, guys, is that we condensed start, bench into the video last week. We are going to put our regular start, bench piece up on the website. The reason we didn't do it last week, we just ran short on time. One of the guys with the website that I'm associated with in the website here, Zeke, got married. I was standing in a wedding. A lot of us were involved, and we're just a way for us to really condense a little bit of time. But we are going to post the start bench on the website this week for some of you guys that don't want to really follow the show and kind of find where the start bench starts and stops. We'll make it an easy read for you on the website. So first of all, thanks all you guys for coming in. And the one thing that I'll ask you to do, hold off to the end with your questions on the lineups. I've got a lot of emails that came in just recently, some things that came across on Twitter. I'm going to try to knock them all out. And if I don't get to them, I really apologize. But here we go, guys. We're going to start off with the quarterback rankings, Week 10, and I don't think there's any surprise at the top of the list. Nick Fitzgerald, Mason Rudolph, Baker Mayfield, 1, 2, 3, Khalil Tate up there, and I even made a comment to all of our email subscribers. At this pace right now, it's hard to see Khalil Tate ranked outside of the top 5 heading into the preseason 2018, and I don't like to make those type of predictions this early or this far in advance, but man, what he's doing right now is just lights out, and that Arizona offense it's a completely different team with Khalil Tate at quarterback this week. So it's no surprise, even against USC, that he is a top 5 player. A lot of emails coming in for Zach Abey, and let me go ahead and address some because I know there were 2 or 3 specifically. Reports have come in that it seems like Abey will be able to play Thursday night, tomorrow night, so I think he's going to be a go, but that doesn't mean that you're not supposed to monitor a situation. The fantasy games right now are just too important at this part of the year. My suggestion is this: if your lineup is set, or maybe you have it set by the end of tonight, you still need to go in and double check that injury report. You still need to check players on the internet. You still need to go in and check players on Twitter, even an hour or 2 before kickoff. College fantasy football is notorious for late-minute scratches, and you don't want that to happen to you. And that's why I always say, guys, you got to err on the side of caution and always start the guy that is a slam dunk start instead of the guy that's questionable on the injury report going into the weekend. So getting back to the quarterback rankings, Zach Abey at number 5. Nathan Rourke played last night. You've got Will Grier, Riley Ferguson, Milton McKenzie. You know, I kind of missed with Milton McKenzie last week. I did not expect him to play that deep into the game. I don't think anyone did. Central Florida, I think, gave up 33 points last week. That was a surprise because they were one of our top defenses last week. And I have to tell you, it was a rough week for good defenses last week. If you look at our top 20 list, that list absolutely got butchered. There were not a lot of great plays on the defensive side for defense special teams last week. So if you did have a good week with your defense and special teams, hats off to you. I know that we butchered a lot of them for you on there, and it was really probably our worst week for projecting defenses last week. So hope we make that up to you this week. Now, guys, if you want to follow along on the website, these rankings are up on there. I told you guys that we were going to put the extended rankings on the site, publish it on the site from here on out from the rest of the year, so you guys can follow along on the website. I'm reading the lists that are directly off there if you want to pull that up while we're doing this. But I highlighted number at 16. I made a note of Sam Darnold. I love the matchup versus Arizona. As long as Arizona puts points up on the board, I really think Sam Darnold has potential to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback this week. So pay attention to him. I really like that play along with the receivers that they have there with Burnett and Vaughns. Taquan Marshall, number 19, Georgia Tech playing at Virginia. He sticks out to me this week because Taquan Marshall's been up and down, up and down. I think with Kervonte Benson, they've really been feeding him the rock. And I'll tell you, those two guys right there, Marshall and Benson, I like them both this week, playing on the road at Virginia against a Cavaliers team that's struggling right now. Taylor Lamb at number 20 I have. Appalachian State playing at UL Monroe. I mentioned this in the email. Appalachian State, I think, is averaging about 100 yards less on the ground than they have over the last 3 seasons. They're playing at UL Monroe this week. They're playing against a UL Monroe team that can score. My guess is that Taylor Lamb is going to have a really good game against that Warhawks defense, and I think Taylor Lamb is worthy of a quarterback to start in your full FBS formats this week. Marcus Childers, it will be interesting to see what he can do on the road at Toledo tomorrow night. A lot of eyes will be on that game, a lot of fantasy potential between Childers, between Woodside, the running backs over at Toledo, the receivers at Toledo as well, and even some of the wide receivers for NIU are creeping up into our rankings as well. So a lot of fantasy potential in that game tomorrow night. Malik Rozier, number 22, right? I've got a note of Malik Rozier because he just, he's got an aggravated injury right now, and this is a really big game for them, playing against Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's solid defense. It'll be really interesting to see if Amon Richards comes back. I think I think he probably plays this week. They need as many weapons on the field as possible. And guys, in the ACC right now, we've got Clemson playing North Carolina State, Miami playing Virginia Tech, and I know I'm stating the obvious here, but it's essentially an ACC semifinal game is what we're looking at right now at this time of the year. But I have been impressed with Rozier when he was healthy. It'll be interesting to see what he can do fighting up. He seems like a gamer to me. I like the way he's been playing. I wouldn't be surprised to see him have his usual 25-point game as he has consistently been giving you guys on a weekly basis. Number 23. Hassan Klue, for you guys in full FBS formats, great sleeper pick this week playing at Old Dominion. I think Hassan Klue is going to put a lot of points up on the board, a lot of rushing yards, score some touchdowns. I think he's a good play, good sleeper play, because you're not looking at Hassan Klue every week in your full FBS formats. And I also have here Kelly Bryant, number 30, Clemson playing at North Carolina State. I mean, look, guys, Clemson needs Kelly Bryant healthy. And last week, he proved what he could do when he was healthy. I love what that offense is doing. I'm not buying into North Carolina State. I think Kelly Bryant could exceed that 30 ranking, but he is playing on the road. But I like Clemson to come out of that game ahead, and I like Bryant maybe to outperform his number 30 ranking. And right below him, we got D'Eriq King, the quarterback of Houston, right? He led the Cougars to an upset of South Florida last week. He's going to get the nod this week. I think there's something that you have to take into account with the D'Eriq King starting at quarterback. I think you're a little bit more on the bubble this week with Lionel Bonner and Stephen Dunbar. If you have them at that receiver spot, you probably have some questions on whether or not to roll with them at the wide receiver 2 or flex spot or even a wide receiver 3 spot. But I do expect King to probably rush the ball 15 to 20 times against East Carolina, and that's a really great matchup for King to get the nod here this week. I would not have no hesitation in picking him up and putting him in your lineup if you are in desperate need of quarterback this week. Jordan Ta'amu, we touched on him last week. First half, very impressive. Ole Miss blew it in the second half. Arkansas came back, led by Cole Kelly, which that's another conversation we have to have here at the end of the quarterback rankings. But I like Jordan Ta'amu. I think he's got really good potential, and if you have him right now heading into the playoffs, you have to love that matchup next week against UL Lafayette. And I think he does enough this week if you need him in your Power 5 formats. He's obviously going to do some damage on the ground, and I think he does a little bit more with the pass this week on the road at Kentucky. I have Ross Bowers right here. I'm looking at him at number 39 playing Oregon State. Oregon State has not been good against the pass all year, and I think this is a good week for Ross Bowers. I think he could surprise being ranked number 39 this week, maybe just a tad too low for him. And number 40, Jake Browning. A lot of emails last week had a lot of start bench Jake Brownings in it. And I'm glad I got that one right for a lot of you guys. I was really concerned that Washington would just pound the ball down UCLA's throat. I mentioned to you guys about my concerns with that UCLA offense, and now it's compounded even more. It looks like Josh Rosen has a hand injury. He may be more of a game-time decision, and that's scary if you've got receivers such as like Darren Andrews on your roster this week. Just don't know what you're going to get right now. And I'll have to tell you, and here's the real disadvantage for some of you guys when it comes to those type of injuries. Injuries aren't so bad when you get a guy that's maybe hurt on a Thursday, Friday, early Saturday. Sometimes these West Coast games don't give you a kickoff till, if you're living on the East Coast, 8, 9 o'clock at night. You're forced, your hand's forced early, or you risk starting a Josh Rosen that may not even actually play. So if that's a situation and it's going up to a game time decision, you've got to leave Rosen on your bench this week. Let's see a couple of players here on the quarterbacks that I'll touch on. John Wolford, 43, Wake Forest, playing at Notre Dame. I don't think that needs any explaining, even what Wake Forest did against Louisville last week. But, you know, Wolford lost his top wideout this year, last week in Greg Dortch. He's lost for the year, and I'm really interested to see that Wake Forest offense on the road at Notre Dame. I don't have a lot of hope for them this week. And I do like Brandon Wimbush up there, and I'll revisit the top of the rankings. I have him at number 13. So I do like that Notre Dame offense, and I do like Brandon Wimbush this week. Number 48, Tanner Lee, to me, is a sleeper pick at quarterback this week. Nebraska playing at home against Northwestern. Tanner Lee's sort of been living in that 20-25 point fantasy range. Northwestern's pass defense is not that good, guys. And if Lee can stay away from throwing touchdowns to the other team and to his team, I think he could surprise this week. If you really need a dark horse sleeper even in a full FBS league and you need a quarterback too, I think Tanner Lee could be worth taking a chance on this week. A couple of notes I'll mention because we are coming in on a Wednesday, so players that we do need to monitor coming up. Josh Rosen, UCLA playing at Utah. We still need to monitor the situation at quarterback at Kansas State right now. Will Ertz play? Will he not? Delton hurt. You know, we've got to keep an eye on that situation over the next 48 hours. Sam Ehlinger was cleared for Texas. Does that necessarily mean he gets to start at TCU? I don't know. I think right now you have to shy away from that. Armani Rogers, Johnny Stanton, UNLV Hawaii situation right now I'm staying away from because we don't know who's going to start. Peyton Ramsey, quarterback for Indiana. I don't think you play him against Wisconsin anyway, but if you're in a small Power 5 league or conference-specific league, you've got to maybe take a chance at leaving him on the bench. And then at Arkansas, you've got Austin Allen and Cole Kelly. And look what Cole Kelly did last week in that come-from-behind win against Ole Miss. And I have to tell you personally right now, just drawing in an experience for college fantasy football over the years, I don't know what incentive right now Arkansas has to put Austin Allen on the field against Coastal Carolina. I actually think Cole Kelly may get another shot this week. That'll be a real interesting story to follow, but we'll see as the week unfolds in regards to those guys. And that's a real quick, brief overview of the quarterback rankings. And like I said, I'm gonna be a little shorter this week. Everybody has the rankings to look at. I'm drawing the guys out that I think kind of jump out to me on where they're at. I'm touching on them. And then as I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to come back and highlight some of these guys that I'm starting in the St. Jude Fantasy League. And if you're just tuning in, go back and listen to the beginning of the show, and I'll throw you out that lineup this week that I'm rolling with as well. But at the top of the running back spots, guys, no surprise. Devin Singletary has been lights out. Saquon Barkley, right, playing on the road at Michigan State. I still think he's a top 5 running back. Rashad Penny against San Jose State. Here's one thing about Rashad Penny this week. I really love him against San Jose State, but I even think Juwan Washington, who's a little bit lower on the list, we've got him listed at 60. I even think he's a sleeper pick in your full FBS modes because they may just run right through San Jose State, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Juwan Washington score a touchdown and go over 100 yards himself this week as San Diego State plays on the road at San Jose State. Josh Adams, number 6, right? Adams in that running game for Notre Dame has just been incredible. Ronald Jones this week, USC, playing at home against Arizona. I love that game to be a high-scored game. I love all of the offense in that game, particularly if you've got USC players. And D'Angelo Brewer, Tulsa running back playing Memphis. A lot of us were scared. Brewer was out 2 weeks ago. A lot of concern going into last week. Brooks and Brewer both played, and if you followed that game, Brooks was injured. He's out for the year now. So unless Brewer gets injured, I expect Brewer to get 25 to 30 carries a game from here on out. And I'm telling you right now, at home game against Memphis, I'm expecting another 25, 30 carries. He should be over the century mark, should find the end zone. I think you're solid gold if you've got D'Angelo Brewer. The Asame St. Jude, Hawaii playing UNLV, and that's a running back game right there, guys. Lexington Thomas versus the Asame St. Jude. 2 top 10 running backs this week. And then Myles Gaskin, number 10, Washington, playing against Oregon. I like him. Justice Hill, you know what? I'm still trying to get some more information on Hill, but he did return to the game last week, so my guess is he's going to be A-OK for that matchup, that Bedlam matchup against Oklahoma this week, and I think he's going to get enough touches to be a top 15 pick. And Benny Snell playing against Ole Miss. I think this could be Benny Snell based on what he did last week, and his potential for this week will probably be his best 2-game run through the entire course of the 2017 season. Justin Jackson, running back Northwestern, playing at Nebraska. I think this is a good week for him. And number 16, Spencer Brown, the running back for UAB playing Rice. I think that you got a really good matchup for him coming up this week. Number 17, Alexander Madison, Boise State playing Nevada. I think this is a really good week for him. I think it's a really good matchup for the whole Boise State offense. I wouldn't be surprised to see Boise State run 40+ on the board this week, and I think it's a good week if you've got both Cedric Wilson and Alexander Madison in your lineups. And then you've got 18, Dontrell Hilliard. Terry Swanson a little lower this week, going up against Northern Illinois. And then Dalen Dawkins. Dalen Dawkins has been great, guys. I'll tell you, if it wouldn't be for Izzy Matthews, Dalen Dawkins right now might be a top 10 running back. But I think he's gone over 100 yards, maybe in 3 of his last 4. Look into that. But he is really putting up some rushing totals. And then Kervonte Benson at 21, Georgia Tech, playing at a struggling Virginia team. And I touched on Benson when I was touching on the quarterbacks with Taquan Marshall. I really like those 2 guys this week. Number 23, Damian Harris, playing at home against LSU. I'm really curious to see how this game plays out. I've been waiting for Harris to get a boatload of carries. I don't know if it'll finally happen because they play a pretty decent team, or so it seems right now LSU is. But I think Damian Harris could really have a lights-out performance in Week 10. Number 24, Brad Anderson. I think that needs a lot of attention because he's been fairly consistent running back over at Middle Tennessee, and I think they really need to lean on him this week. It'll be curious to see if they do, because not only is Brent Stockstill still questionable, but John Urzua is out for the season. So questions remain. What's going on at quarterback? And based on last year, I would not be surprised to see a guy like Ty Lee, or to go ahead and see somebody, look, Brad Anderson or Ty Lee, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him out of the Wildcat formation. Richie James is gone, Urzua is gone, and if Stockstill doesn't play, I don't know who else they have to put in that Wildcat formation, but that's my guess, guys. I think if you've got Ty Lee and you've got Anderson, you've got to get them in your lineups this week because it's a sweet matchup against UTEP. So I think you ride that potential, you ride that matchup out, and you take your chances on those 2 guys from Middle Tennessee this week. We've got Jeffrey Wilson in at 28 with some asterisks. Jeffrey Wilson was dinged up last week, and Nick Smith came in and cleaned house. It'll be interesting to see if Jeffrey Wilson is healthy. It'll be interesting to see if Jeffrey Wilson plays, and if he does play, how much Smith gets worked into the lineup. And that's why Wilson's down there at number 28 for us this week. And I have to tell you, we've got LaMichael Pirine at 26, Jordan Wilkins at 25. I like both of those SEC running backs this week, especially Pirine with the loss of Malik Davis over at Florida. I think you'll see his workload increase, and I think it's really a great time. And I'm going to mention this because we actually have, and I'm going to cheat a little bit, LaMichael Pirine in the start section this week of our start bench. And what a difference 1 week makes, because last week, going against Georgia, he was a Week 9 bench, but in Week 10, LaMichael Pirine is a start, and I'll touch on him and tell you why. coming up when we get into the start bench piece. Rodney Anderson, 30 right now for Oklahoma, riding that hot hand. Oklahoma's riding him at running back, and so I think you have to get him in your lineups. And then John Kelly at 31. I think when you look at the matchup of John Kelly for Tennessee playing Southern Mississippi, it looks really good on paper. But given what happened last week with his suspension, and also given the fact that Ty Chandler did perform well when he played, that does worry me a little bit. I'm worried that Ty Chandler may take a few carries away from John Kelly in this matchup, even if John Kelly plays at all. We've been told he's probable, but I think you have to be a little cautious with that matchup as well, and that's why Kelly's outside of the top 30. Travis Homer, I tell you, he looks to be struggling a little bit of late. He's not Mark Walton. I thought he'd actually be playing better than he has up until this point. Real big fumble last week. And I'm really disappointed in the way that Travis Homer has performed from a fantasy perspective. Does he have a bounce back week this week? I'm not so sure. Virginia Tech's defense is pretty good. I happen to think that Malik Rozier is going to have to do some damage in the air for Miami to move that ball. And then number 33, Royce Freeman. I'll tell you guys, if there is any player in the country right now from a scoring standpoint, when you look at his first 4 games and his last 4 games, I mean, once again, last week, Royce Freeman, I think, maybe had his 4th consecutive 100-yard game in which he did not score a touchdown. So that's why Royce Freeman is down there at 33. He's not finding the end zone right now, and he's got a big matchup, big road, tough matchup at Washington this week. Sonny Michel, number 35, Georgia, playing South Carolina. I'll tell you, both of those running backs are doing well right now with Georgia, and right now Michel's really outperforming Chubb this week, so he really bumps up into the rankings. Ray Lowry, the running back of Old Dominion, was fighting through a hip pointer last week, and I have to tell you, I was burned by Ray Lowry myself. I think he'll be back in the lineup. I think he's healthy, but you know what? You just don't know. And that's some things about college fantasy football. You just don't know until these games unfold, because we do not get those type of injury reports sometimes until after the game has taken place. And sometimes it's like a roll of the dice, guys. And then one guy right here I'll touch on, number 46, Gus Edwards. I think this is a really good matchup for him going up against Maryland. I'm really interested to see what Gus Edwards can do. And then we have an asterisk down there at Ralph Webb at number 54, gets Western Kentucky. If you saw this matchup on paper, you would have thought that it was a start, but it looks like Ralph Webb is going to be, I don't know if he's going to be questionable this week or not, but I know he got hurt last week and actually came out of the game. Now, the list is long for questionable guys that are not even ranked this week. We've got Bryce Love, Stanford at Washington State, and I get a lot of questions. Why are you guys not putting Bryce Love in there? I tell you, we started this new thing this year. I did not want to include guys into the rankings that we thought were a 50-50 shot to play, because I thought it skewed the rankings a little bit, because right now I have to tell you, if Bryce Love's scheduled to be a game time decision, I don't know how you play him this week. There's too much riding on this matchup. If you're in a playoff matchup, if you have a playoff spot riding on the line, you literally have to be paying attention to the news feed right up until kickoff to find out if Bryce Love's a go. If you haven't found out by Thursday evening that Bryce Love is 100% slam dunk start, you've got to look elsewhere, guys. You've got to start preparing now. Jonathan Taylor, the running back Wisconsin, playing at Indiana, same thing. We're hearing reports that he may be able to play. And I asked a question, here it is. Wisconsin's got the whole season riding on the line. Do they really take a chance on starting an injured Jonathan Taylor against an Illinois team that they should probably beat without him? If they can't win without Jonathan Taylor, they don't belong in this whole race anyway. And I don't know what incentive the Badgers have to play him this week. I have to tell you, if I own Jonathan Taylor, I'm already looking someplace else, because I just don't believe he's going to play. Nyheim Hines, North Carolina State, playing against Clemson. Another questionable player. And not only is he questionable, he's going against a good defense. A double whammy, guys. Jordan Chun. Fantasy owners have been stung 2 weeks in a row by Chun. He had a laceration, sat out 2 weeks ago, sat out again last week. Both times he was told he was going to be probable. I don't know what to expect from Jordan Chun this week. It's almost to the point now where I have to see him on the field to believe he's going to play. And that's why Jordan Chun is not ranked. Same thing with Justin Stockton. Trey King playing really well in his absence, and I'm really concerned on whether or not we're going to see Stockton this week playing against Kansas State. Same thing, Duke Catalon Houston playing East Carolina. And and Jalen Moore, running back Appalachian State, playing at UL Monroe. And some of these guys have, I mean, look, some of these are really big matchups. I mean, I would love Jalen Moore healthy in a matchup at UL Monroe right now. But I have to tell you, if I'm on the fence and I've got Jalen Moore and Marcus Williams, the best news that I can get is to tell me Jalen Moore is not going to play on Friday. Because then I've got a clear vision of who I'm going to start. And last week, the only reason why I found out that Jalen Moore was a sit is I actually tuned into the Appalachian State radio broadcast on the internet and found out about 5 minutes before kickoff. And that's the key, guys. If you have these guys in these big matchups, you have to go to some rather obscure places other than Twitter or to a main newspaper site to find some of the news on these players. And I actually tuned into the Appalachian State broadcast on the internet last week, 5 minutes before kickoff, and realized that Jalen Moore wasn't going to play. But that brings us through the running backs, guys, and we're going to kind of get through the receivers here, get through the start bench, do some Q&A. I'm going to share some email stories that I've had over the last couple of years, guys, and then we're going to be through with Week 10. So thanks for holding in there. Let's jump right to the receivers, guys. And look, as the season goes on, less surprises at the top of the receiving board. Anthony Miller, Trey Quinn, Michael Gallup, James Washington. Penny Hart at 5 is a new addition to the top 5. But pay attention to Penny Hart. His production has been stellar this year. Got a road matchup against Georgia Southern this week. I like for Penny Hart to be a top 5 fantasy receiver this week. Steve Ishmael back in the top 10 playing at Florida State and struggling Florida State team. DJ Moore back there in the top 10. And then Cortland Sutton, SMU. 2 receivers in the top 10, but I'm telling you guys, they've been producing every week. And yes, they have a tough matchup against Central Florida this week. Central Florida gave up a ton of points last week, but I'll tell you, until I see either of those guys not producing now, both of them have to be ranked high. And that bodes well if you've got quarterback Ben Hicks as well. Deontay Burnett, number 11, USC wide receiver playing Arizona. And Stanley Morgan, Nebraska wide receiver playing Northwestern. I tell you what, guys, we're going to touch on him. I've got him in the start list. I'm going to tell you why when we, in a few minutes. But I really like Stanley Morgan for Nebraska playing at home against Northwestern. Deontay Johnson, what a comeback he made last week. I don't expect him to run another punt back, to catch another 80-yard touchdown, another 60-yard touchdown. But boy, if you started Deontay Johnson, and I did have him in one league, boy, you were rewarded big time last week. Number 14, Jaleel Scott, New Mexico State wide receiver playing at Texas State. Jaleel Scott's come down to earth a little bit. He's not really putting up numbers like he was, in the beginning of the year. And then Jalen Guyton as well has sort of tailed off in the last couple of weeks. And I think that's the story with some of these receivers that I'm going to touch on. But I do think at number 16, 17, Thomas Owens, FIU, has been incredibly consistent over the last 3 weeks. And if you like SMU receivers and you like SMU to score some points, I think you have to like Central Florida and you have to like Traquan Smith's potential for Central Florida playing on the road at SMU. I mentioned at the top of the show I did like Cedric Wilson for Boise State. I mentioned that when I was touching on Alexander Madison. And look back at number 20, Steve Sims, the receiver for Kansas playing home against Baylor. Great matchup. Looks like Carter Stanley is going to be the quarterback this week. And I think that's good news if you own Sims, because he has been somewhat of a disappointment over the last few weeks. But after last week and then a good matchup this week, I think you could feel confident putting Sims in your lineup. But you know what? Just like I mentioned with Khalil Herbert a few weeks ago, it is Kansas, guys. And always expect the unexpected. Never take it for granted that a Kansas player is a lock for a solid week, because you don't know which player is actually going to show up. Javon Moore, number 21, receiver Missouri playing home against Florida. I still like that Missouri offense this week playing at home against Florida. Do I think Drew Lock's going to throw 5 more touchdowns? No, I don't. But it'll be interesting to see how that Florida team does going on the road against a really hot Missouri offense. Number 23, Wyatt Demps. Even though I like the Boise State defense right now, I still think Demps is a solid play at receiver for Nevada. And then Irvin Phillips, there we go. We have our second Syracuse receiver in there in the top 25. And then Karan White, West Virginia wide receiver playing at home against Iowa State. A receiver that I have touched on over the last few weeks. that was under the radar and for many of you guys, and he's really performed well lately, is Kanawai Noah, the wide receiver, Cal, playing a good matchup against Oregon State. I mentioned that I like Bowers at the top when we were doing the quarterback rankings. I like Noah at the wide receiver spot. And then number 27, we've got our second USC receiver. A lot of questions coming in on Tyler Vaughns this week. And the last I saw, Stephen Mitchell was still questionable. So that's even better news if you own Tyler Vaughns. I look for a lot of points scored in that game, and I like Burnett and Vaughns both to be in there at receiver. And I did even field an email this week where a guy had both of those players, and I would not hesitate putting both of them in your starting lineup this week. Number 29, 30, and 31, if you're following along on the website, we've got Darren Andrews, Cam Phillips, Dante Pettis, three guys that have certainly tailed off since the beginning of the year. All three of these guys I'm really concerned with. Andrews, I'm concerned for one, because of possibly the loss of Josh Rosen this week. So I do think that you have to take that into account. Dante Pettis, number 31, Washington playing at home against Oregon. Washington has really been leaning on that running game. If they get up big on Oregon, there's really not a lot of incentive to throw the ball, and that's why Pettis scares me this week. Of those three guys, the one that I feel best about right now is Cam Phillips. And the reason why I feel better about Cam Phillips than Andrews or Pettis is because Virginia Tech needs Phillips this week. They've got everything riding on the line against Miami. So this is a guy from start to finish that they're going to need to feed the ball or find a way to get the ball into his hands if they are going to beat Miami this week. So of those three guys, Cam Phillips is the one that I feel most confident in this week. And then James Garden at 36, he did play last week. He should have been in the top 5 off of that performance. And then number 39, guys, Ty Lee. Number 40, KJ Hill. Ty Lee, like I mentioned, I still like the potential for him. Hopefully he gets some Wildcat snaps, but there's nobody really for them to throw the ball to right now. The question is who is going to get him the ball? And I had an email come in, why isn't Ty Lee higher on your rankings now with Richie James out for the rest of the year? Well, these rankings were made I took it to account that Richie James was already going to be out and that we didn't even know who Middle Tennessee State's quarterback was. And that's why Ty Lee has not budged off of that 39 spot. And right now, number 40, KJ Hill, Ohio State playing on the road at Michigan State. I don't know if there's a hotter receiver right now, maybe with the exception of a Trey Quinn, than KJ Hill over the last couple of weeks. He's just been lights out for you guys. A.J. Brown, wide receiver, Ole Miss at Kentucky. I have a little concern about those Ole Miss receivers, especially after last week's game against Arkansas. Jordan Tamu's going to run the ball a little bit more often. I don't know if he really has a favorite target, and that's another guy like Andrews, like Pettis, like Phillips that has tailed off significantly since the beginning of the year. And then a couple of names I'll throw in there at sleepers just to kind of keep your eye on is Valdez Scantling, the wide receiver, South Florida, playing at Connecticut. Big week last week. I think he could have another good week again. Justin Hobbs, Tulsa, playing Memphis, could be a sleeper pick this week. I think Hobbs has had some solid weeks. If he can just find the end zone, it'll make him a regular play from here on out. And I do think North Carolina State is going to have to find Kelvin Harmon often. You know what? With Hines questionable at the running back spot, you can bet that Clemson defense will be targeting and zeroing in on Jalen Samuel. So I do think Kelvin Harmon could have a nice week this week against Clemson, even though they do play Clemson. So that's sort of the rundown of some of the guys that I highlighted in the top 50 guys. And then I'm going to go ahead and just, like I mentioned, if you missed the beginning of the show, I'm going to go through the start bench. I'm going to mention a lineup that I'm using in the St. Jude Charity League this week, and then I'm going to get to some Q&A, guys, and then share a couple of emails that I've gotten over the last few years that I think are entertainment. And my ask for you guys is if you have any of those in your league, crazy stories with leagues, guys, something that you'd really love for me to talk about on the show and dog one of your boys in your league because the craziest thing happened to them, send in those emails, ask me to read them on the show. I'll try to pick one or two out every week to do on the show. And as I mentioned last week, I'm going to try to do some things for the bowl season for you guys as well. Some fantasy shows for the bowl season, some previews. We don't get a lot during the bowl season. We're going to try to do some more shows for you guys as well during the bowl season. So with that being said, guys, Going to jump right into the start bench this week, and I have actually 4 guys on the start, 4 guys on the bench, and for you guys that are just tuning in, these will go up on the website this week on a separate piece. We will have the published printed version on the website. We didn't do it last week because we were just too condensed for time, and we just incorporated the start bench into the live show last week. But with that being said, they will be published on the website probably before the end of the night or by tomorrow morning. So with that being said, as I usually do, I'm going to go ahead and start with the bench list, and I am going to start with I think maybe one of the more obvious benches this week, and that's A.J. Turner, the running back, South Carolina, playing at Georgia. You know, Turner has led South Carolina in rushing over the past 2 weeks. He's totaled 207 yards, and he's scored touchdowns, I think, in each of the past 2 games. However, only 6 teams in the nation, only 6 teams in the FBS are allowing fewer than 100 yards per game, and Georgia is one of those teams, guys. They're only allowing a little over 94 yards per game. There shouldn't be any of expectation of him finding the end zone either because Georgia is only allowing 11.9 points per game. When you figure in the points that Georgia is allowing, the rushing yards that they're allowing, I think that's a recipe for A.J. Turner to find the bench this week. So even though he's emerged in that running back group for South Carolina, he is a Week 10 bench on the road at Georgia. All these guys are running backs. All 4 of them are running backs this week, and we have two full FBS guys and 2 Power 5 guys. Marquise Young, running back, Massachusetts, playing at Mississippi State this week, and Young goes into his Week 10 matchup at Mississippi State with back-to-back games of at least 100 yards rushing and scoring at least 1 touchdown. However, the Minutemen will be traveling to Starkville, and they face a Bulldogs defense that's only allowed 123 rushing yards per game on the ground so far this season. And that's not a bad statistic considering Mississippi State has already played LSU, Auburn, and Georgia, which run the ball significantly. So I think you leave Marquise Young, running back Massachusetts, on your bench playing a road game at Mississippi State this week. Darius Geis, running back LSU, playing at Alabama, and I know it's no surprise Darius Geis is on the bench this week because they're playing an Alabama defense. But guys, we have some things to take into account here. One, are we really going to question this? Are we really going to sit Darius Geis after a 270-plus yard performance against Ole Miss? Yes, we are, and I know Geis is a stud, no doubt about that. And you know what? His fantasy impact would have been tremendous this year had he not gotten hurt and he would have been healthy. I mean, you're talking like Saquon Barkley type impact. But you have to realize one thing. In a Power 5 format, and I'm saying this for you guys in Power 5 formats, you may have to roll the dice with Geis this week. You may not have a lot of juice on your bench, so you may have to give him the nod. But in full FBS formats, how can you start him against a defense? A defense that's number 1 against the run. They're the number 1 scoring defense, and they've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns this season. For me, in a full FBS format, it's way too much of a risk starting Darius Geis on the road in Week 10 at Alabama. And the last running back on our bench list, Kelton Moore, running back Nevada, playing at Boise State. Now, this may be a little bit more of a surprise because going into Nevada's Week 10 matchup at Boise, Moore has totaled more than 100 yards from scrimmage and scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. However, Boise State has been solid on the defensive side of the ball since that 24-7 win over BYU. The Broncos have not allowed more than 14 points in any of their 4 previous games. They're only allowing 102 yards per game on the ground. In Week 7, in that win over San Diego State, the Broncos limited running back Rashad Penny of San Diego State to 53 yards rushing. That was his lowest output of the season. Moore needs to be a factor in the passing game if he's going to have any value this week. And for me, his ceiling is too low and too much of a risky pick. I like Kelton Moore to sit on the bench this week playing on the road at Boise State. Now that brings us through the bench players, guys, and we're going to go ahead with 4 start guys. And I'm going to run that down for you real quick right here, and I'm going to start at the top. D'Eriq King, quarterback, Houston, playing East Carolina, getting the nod this week. And I know a lot of questions coming in. Do you just start King in? Is it too much risk for him to get to start? What if he has one or two bad throws? I think, first of all, Houston's going to commit to the run a little bit heavily this week against East Carolina, and there's no reason not to. You know, King led the Cougars to an upset win over South Florida last week. He passed for 137 yards and a touchdown, but more impressively added 83 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, including the game winner in the closing seconds of that game to pull off the upset. And this week, D'Eriq King, starting quarterback for Houston, will face statistically the worst defense in the FBS. ECU has given up 45.9 points per game and 577.6 yards of offense. Both of those are last in the FBS. And I think if your quarterback, if you picked him up and got a start this week, you take the chance rolling against the worst defense in the FBS. And D'Eriq King, quarterback Houston, is a Week 10 start, playing at home against East Carolina. I saw some questions coming up with this guy's name, and so maybe this brings some clarity to the subject. But Lamichael Perine, running back Florida, playing on the road at Missouri, and it's amazing how it's amazing how fast things change in 1 week in college fantasy football. I mentioned that when I was touching on Perine doing the running back rankings. Perine and teammate Malik Davis were a bench against Georgia last week, and all of a sudden, 1 week later, Davis is lost for the season due to injury, and Perine inherits a sweet Week 10 matchup against a Missouri defense that's given up over 192 yards per game on the ground and have allowed 21 rushing touchdowns this season. That's a recipe for success. I think you get Lamichael Perine, running back Florida, in your lineup this week and start him on the road at Missouri. We'll go to 2 wide receivers, Power 5 schools, guys. Stanley Morgan, wide receiver, Nebraska, playing Northwestern. There have been 2 consistencies with Nebraska offense this year, one of which has been Tanner Lee's ability to throw pick sixes. But on a more serious note, the other has been undoubtedly the consistency and production from receiver Stanley Morgan. Morgan has topped the 90-yard mark in 6 of 7 games. He has caught a touchdown pass in 6 or 7 games this year. And this week, the Cornhuskers host Northwestern, and Morgan's going to go up against the Wildcats' pass defense that's given up over 270 yards per game in the air, which ranks them last in the Big Ten and ranks them among the 12 worst teams in the FBS. You have to feel really good if you've got Stanley Morgan this week, wide receiver Nebraska, playing at home against Northwestern, and that's why in the quarterback rankings, I actually threw Tanner Lee as a surprise play for this week and for you guys in 2 quarterback full FBS leagues. And the final play this week, wide receiver Tyler Vaughns, USC, playing at home against Arizona. Now, on paper, remember, a lot of this is, it looks good. It doesn't always necessarily come true. But on paper, Vaughn looks like a no-brainer in a smart smart play in a Week 10 matchup at home against Arizona. And there are several factors that favor starting the freshman receiver. 1, consistency. Vaughns has caught at least 5 passes for 65 yards or more in 5 consecutive games. 2, timing. The matchup against Arizona comes at a time when the Wildcats are rolling on offense with Khalil Tate at quarterback, so the possibility of a shootout is there. So timing plays into his favor. And 3, the matchup. The Wildcats, Arizona, Arizona is only one of 3 FBS schools that are giving up more than 300 yards per game in the air. So that looks good if you've got Sam Darnold, Deontay Burnett, and like I mentioned just now, Week 10 start, Tyler Vaughns, the freshman receiver, Arizona, playing at home against Arizona, guys. And so that's going to do it for the player rankings. That's going to do it for the start bench. I'm going to go ahead and hammer out some Q&A right now, guys, and then I'm going to go ahead and sort of, you know what, before I get into the Q&A, let me touch back on my lineup that I'm going to start in the St. Jude League. And for you guys that are just tuning in, this league, St. Jude League, was a charity league set up by Zachary Toe. So Zachary, if you listen to the show, or if you know anyone that knows Zachary, tell him I said thank you for setting that up. But it's a cumulative points league that plays out over the course of the college football season. You can only select, it's a 14-man lineup. I think it's 4 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 4 receivers, a tight end, and a flex. You can only use one player one time during the season. So once when you use Lamar Jackson, you can only use him for 1 week, and then he's shot. So it really tests your knowledge of depth. During the course of this league, I took over first place in week 4. I'm still sitting in first place heading into week 10 by about 100. I think going into today was 180 points. But that's not the reason why I'm bringing this up. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because the players that I start are averaging, I think, 22.5 points, which is pretty impressive. So what I'm going to do this week, if I don't make any last-minute changes, I'm going to tell you who I have in right now. So that really bodes well because I pick guys, 1, that I can't pick before, and 2, that have to have good matchups this week. Here's my lineup as of today for the St. Jude Charity League right now, in which I'm averaging 22.5 points per player. At quarterback this week, I have in my starting lineup Brandon Wimbush. I have not used him yet, and I'm using him at home against Wake Forest. I'm starting Taylor Lamb this week, Appalachian State, playing on the road at UL Monroe. That game has potential to be a high-scoring game. I am starting Hassan Klue, the quarterback Charlotte, playing on the road at Old Dominion. I like that matchup. I have not used him this week, and I'm actually starting Derek King, the Houston quarterback, playing against East Carolina this week. I'm playing that matchup with the lead. I'm still playing aggressively, and I'm still taking Derek King. So if you guys trying to catch me and you listen to the show, you might want to change it up a little bit. That is my starting quarterbacks for this week. At the running back spot, I'm taking Josh Adams. I have not used Josh Adams this yet, and I'm riding Wimbush and Adams in Week 10 against Wake Forest. I have not used Spencer Brown yet. UAB running back playing Rice. I'm taking Spencer Brown this week. I took Andrew Clare last night. He put up 20 points for me. I just wish he'd have gotten more carries, but I already have started Andrew Clare and got 20 points for him this week. I'm actually taking Brad Anderson, the running back from Middle Tennessee, playing against UTEP. I think they need to lean on him with questions at quarterback. He is one of my running backs this week, and I am taking LaMichael Pirine. Guys, I put my money where my mouth is, and I take the guys that I start. I don't just throw a start bench list together. I actually am taking LaMichael Pirine and Derek King, 2 guys that I had on the start list this week. So that those are the running backs that I'm taking. At the receiver position, I'm taking DJ Moore, the Maryland receiver. I have not used him yet. I think this may be the best matchup left on the schedule, and I'm taking him on the road against Rutgers. I'm taking Stanley Morgan, another start bench player, at home against Northwestern. I have not used him yet. I am taking Cedric Wilson. I mentioned I liked him at the beginning of the show, taking him against Nevada. And I am taking Tyler Vaughns, the freshman receiver, USC, against Arizona. So there you go. Every guy that I have put in the start piece this week, I'm taking in my St. Jude Fantasy League. At tight end, I have not used Mark Andrews yet. I'm taking Mark Andrews this week in Bedlam, playing at Oklahoma State. And that rounds out my lineup in the St. Jude League this week. So for all you guys, and I think there's only about 4 or 5 of you that look like can catch me, that's my lineup. If you want to tweak things up and do some things to try to catch me, feel free to do that, guys. I don't mind putting all my picks out there, guys. To me, that's the fun part about this. I love putting everything out there and letting you guys try to catch me, letting you guys use those rankings every week. And so that is the fun of it. So with that being said, guys, we're going to go into some Q&A, and then I'm going to share some emails with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and catch some of the questions that were coming in while we were on the show that I made note of and took some screenshots of, and I'll run through those first. So hopefully I don't double up. But let's go to Adam Meyer. He said, hey guys, Power 5 plus AAC, 2 quarterbacks PPR. He's got Tamu or King, and he's also starting JT Barrett. I have to go with Derek King. I'm putting a lot of chips in the middle of the table with him this week. At running back, Homer, Benson, or Higdon. And at flex, he's got Biner or the other running back above. And I have to tell you right now, I would take all 3 of those running backs right now. I don't have a lot of confidence in Bonner with King at quarterback right now. I think they run a ball a lot against East Carolina. And I think the high percentage play is, even though Homer has a tough matchup against Virginia Tech, I think you start King with Barrett, take Homer, take Benson, take Higdon, and then actually save Bonner. Let's see. Another question coming in from Harlan. Pick 3. Spencer Brown, Jordan Wilkins, Zach Moss, Benny Snell, and Ito Smith. Wow, what a stable of running backs this week. And I have to tell you, I'm going with Spencer Brown. Don't get away from him right now. Jordan Wilkins is tough to get off of right now. Ito Smith with a tough matchup this week. This might be the week I leave him on the bench, only because you have Moss and because you have Benny Snell. And a lot of guys writing in, Moss is too low on our running back rankings. I don't know. If Tyler Huntley steals a lot of carries from Moss and the touchdowns, I could see Moss going over 100 yards, but will he find the end zone? But I have to tell you, I'm taking Brown, I'm taking Wilkins, and it's hard to get away from Benny Snell right now. That would be the three that I would go with. Joe, this comes in from Al. With Jonathan Taylor questionable, I have to choose an alternate. Jarvion Franklin, Jordan Chunn, or Darius Geis. Geis is out. Chunn I have to see on the field. And Al, I have to tell you, if you're riding with a lot on the line this week, I think you got to take Jarvion Franklin because he's just the safest play, and he's still going to be productive for you. Question coming in from let's see, I don't know who this is from. I forgot the name. Anybody worth picking up at MTSU after the Richie James injury? Short answer for me was just no. I'd rather have Ty Lee. So that's going to do it for the questions that I took screenshots of on email. I'll go ahead and check Twitter real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and check the chat of the questions that you guys sent in on here. And don't go anywhere, guys, because I got two really good email stories that are real interesting coming up for you guys. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's see what we got. Looks like we got more. Quentin Flowers, King, or Milton? I have to tell you, for as much as I like King this week, I would have to, man, that's a really good question. Boy, that's a pleasant problem to have. I got Mackenzie Milton, at number 9, and Quentin Flowers at 11. I have to tell you, I would probably go with Milton just for the potential in that game against SMU and hope for a shootout. D'Eriq King does have a little risk. I don't know how much risk he has going against the worst defense in the country. And Quentin Flowers is just underperformed, even though I do like his matchup this week. But it's hard to get away from Mackenzie Milton right now, and that's who I would go with. Perine over Dobbins, that's an affirmative. That's an absolute yes for me. Get Perine in your lineup this week. No word other than he wouldn't trust him anyways. The injury question in playing Clemson. Need to start 3. Power 5. Starting DJ Moore, deciding between Cam Phillips, Tyler Vaughns, A.J. Brown, and Jonathan Nance with a 25-point deduction. You got Moore right. You got to get him in. You've got to get Tyler Vaughns in. And I don't know about A.J. Brown right now. I think Virginia Tech needs Cam Phillips. Dominic, I'm getting those 3 in your lineup. And I'm a little late, and you may have covered it, but any word on Hines for NC State and his injury status going forward? I still have him, Hines, as questionable going forward this week. And then if there's more questions in there, guys, and I'm missing it, that's all the questions that I'm showing on here. So if you guys can think of any more, feel free to email me in if you have the exclusive email. But like I mentioned last week, this is what we're doing, guys. We're putting the extended rankings to be published on the website from here on out, traditionally around week 10, week 11, when guys get eliminated from the playoffs. We lose a little bit of traffic. It's a way to keep traffic coming to the website. I am going to start publishing my weekly observations and notes on the website as well, starting in week 10, which will be Sunday evening or Monday. I have not put week 9. I have not put the week 9 observations and notes up on the website yet because that's still exclusive to the email guys, and I'll wait to the end of the week before I put the week 9 up there. But if you do have the exclusive email, send in your roster questions, send in your lineup questions. And some of you guys watching the show, I've been getting a lot of forwarded emails. You're emailing the website administrative email. If you send questions to the administrative email that's posted on the website, you probably will not get those questions answered. It's just an admin email. So with that being said, guys, let me fill you in on a couple of stories. Real quick, 2 interesting email stories, and this is what I ask. if we're going to do some shows in the future and we're going to do some shows during the bowl season, let's have a little entertainment. Let's have a little fun. Send me some emails in that I could read on the show. Bang your league mates, something that you did. Just give me some crazy stories. I want to hear some crazy fantasy football stories. It could have been an outcome of a game. It could have been something on a draft, or it could be something related to one of these two emails. And first of all, before I read this email, and this has to do with a current player and a family member that emailed me, and I teased that out a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to read this email to you. So that's real interesting. But one email story that I'll share, and this goes back to last year. And you know what, guys? If I throw in, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but this is kind of funny. But I had a guy email the website at the beginning of the year last year and say, to whom it may concern, blah, 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 I'm so-and-so, and we've been playing in a college fantasy football league for a number of years, and one of our, I'm really inquiring to know if this guy, and he gave me his name, buys your preseason fantasy guide, because our league specifies a rule that you cannot use any outside resources unless you do study and do homework of your own. You cannot use any and buy any type of outside resources. And it wasn't like I was going to, and here's what he said. Because this guy ran through our league, dominated, went undefeated, and didn't lose a game. And we know that he couldn't possibly have done that by himself. And first of all, my response was, if the guy was subscribing to the site or bought it, I wasn't going to give up a name anyway. But how crazy is that story? That's like having a guy go to a draft and saying, man, you can't bring a magazine to a draft. You have to look up and do your homework. Guys, that's what the college fantasy football site is for. First of all, let me see how I want to put this. Off the record, okay? I'm glad the guy went undefeated and ran through the league. On the record, I'm not saying whether or not he bought it, but come on, guys, read the tea leaves. Guys, dumb rule, okay? Any resource possible to dominate your league, use it. And if there's a league like that, man, shame on you guys for having that. That sounds like a league that's set up for somebody that runs it to want to win it every year. I mean, come on, guys. You can't do any fantasy research. Use an outside resource. Really crazy story. So anyway, that's one of the email crazy stories that I have. And here's one, guys. I've shared this with some of my friends, and we laughed at it. And I thought it would be worth sharing and laughing again. But this was in September of 2015. When we were kind of putting up some of the preseason rankings on the site, but we were only putting up like maybe the top 10, top 15. I got this random email on a Wednesday afternoon, and the email came in and said, I'll read it word for word, was just curious how you come up with kicker rankings on your site. What stats did you use to determine them? We are trying to make our son more marketable for the NFL. He led the nation in field goal percentage last year, hit 250-plus yarders in one season, and beat Martin Grammatica's record for points scored in his freshman year. And yeah, that's the father of the guy that still kicks for Kansas State right now. Like the college fantasy football rankings, we're going to improve his son's draft stock. I'm telling you, my buddies and I get a really kick and have fun with that email. So that's just a couple of email-related stories that I wanted to share with you guys. And I want you guys to send me in some crazy email stories from your college fantasy football leagues. And one thing while we're on the story of sending me emails and sending me feedback, guys, give me feedback on the show. Subscribe to the show. You'll get alerts when we upload stuff during the season. Give me a thumbs up. If you like anything, give me a comment, send an email. Anything that you like. Got emails last week on Joe with the start bench piece. We really like it when you separate it from the video. Took that into account. We're going to do that. We had an exception last week. So with that being said, guys, if there's anything to relay on to you guys as well, we will certainly continue this conversation on the show next week. But we did condense a lot here in the beginning of the week. So pay attention to the injury report over the next 24, 48 hours. A lot can change from tonight to Saturday. So with that being said, once again, my name is Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the college fantasy football site. Good luck to you guys in week 10, and we'll talk again next week in week 11. Good luck, guys.